These days, there are a lot of people producing some really nice sounding distortion boxes that are essentially modifications of some classic fuzz boxes like the Fuzz Face and the Tube Screamer. But when SourceAudio released this pedal, the Soundblox Multiwave Distortion, the idea was to create some sounds that people hadn't heard before. So in this box, you'll hear not just one, but several really unique sounding distortions. From a super clear jazz chord friendly distortion to a mega fuzzed out but oddly synthesizer-esque tone. Keep in mind that the Multiwave is also available in the Pro configuration, which includes 6 user presets, a 7-band EQ, and a MIDI input. Okay, let's get started. The effects knob is divided into 2 categories, multiband and single band, and each of those categories is divided into 3 subcategories: normal, foldback, and octave. So first on the dial is multiband normal, and multiband processing is one of the big ideas behind this pedal. What happens is your guitar signal goes into the pedal, it's then divided into 10 separate frequency bands. Each frequency band is then distorted separately and recombined for the outputted signal. Now when you do this process, what you don't get is intermodulation, which happens with most single band units, and that's kind of a muddying up of sound where notes are kind of stepping on each other. But it's also the sort of distortion that we're used to. But with this, the sound is similar to what you might hear if you had 6 different players playing a single note to build one chord. So as you can imagine, it's a very articulate, muscular sound. You can get away with playing 7th chords, 9th chords. You can also do some arpeggios, and it's all going to be very crystal clear, but it will also be distorted and pretty tough sounding. So check it out. Okay, so you can play complex chords with multiband processing, but multiband normal will also give you a nice punch and sheen if you're just banging out some nice big Pete Townsend style power chords. Okay, the second category in the multiband side is foldback. Now we still have the multiband processing happening, so that sound is there, but now we're using a different kind of distortion curve. Now with most distortion curves, what happens is you have the input signal and it reaches the threshold and it clips. It essentially cuts off the top of the sound wave. But with foldback distortion, what happens is the sound wave goes up, and instead of clipping and leveling off, it goes back down, and then the level comes back up and back down and back up. But it happens really fast. So you get a really hairy sounding distortion, but it also will give you a really cool synthy sound. If you hold notes for a while, you hear these other overtones singing out, and you can get some really interesting stuff happening. Multiband octave. Now we're going to have the multiband sound, but with an additional octave up, which sounds very neat. Effect type 13 is also a multiband octave sound, but this one has foldback happening as well. Now I'm going to ease back on the volume on guitar a little bit just to bring out the octave sound. It's not really recommended to play intervals or chords in multiband octave because wild stuff kind of happens, but you can use it to your advantage. It can sound really nice. So check it out. You'll hear it when it happens. It's pretty obvious. on to the single band processing side of the pedal. Now, starting with single band normal, so I've stated and restated how you can get very unique sounds out of this thing, futuristic synthy sounds, but with single band normal, you can get a classic distortion, you know, if you need it. So let's try 70s sounding rock riff. Moving on to single band foldback. This is where things get really wild. Use this if you really want the heavy fuzzed out sound. I often describe this as kind of a cyborg, half human, half machine version of a big muff pedal. So listen to when I hold notes, how the sound really starts to percolate and a lot of overtones start to jump out. And it's really cool for chords, but obviously it's great for leads as well. And finally we have single band octave. I'm going to keep the drive cranked up so I got a sound similar to the single band foldback, but we've got that octave up happening as well. So great for leads, really nasty tone. So, as promised, we're going to do a little tour of the control panel, starting with the effects knob. You use the effect knob to select the distortion type you want. The sustain knob adjusts the amount of input gain going into a fixed threshold compressor situated in front of the multi-wave's distortion element. Increasing the sustain knob creates more sustain. Drive control adjusts the gain of the signal going into the distortion element. And the output knob adjusts the output of the effect. Okay, and to wrap things up, if you really want to have some fun, I definitely recommend picking up this pedal as well, the Soundblox guitar envelope filter. The envelope filter and the multiband just sound really cool together, just endless wild sound possibilities. And that is a whole nother video, but I'll give you a little taste. Let's try it out.